My son looked directly into the eyes of my 84-year-old mother and said, "Stop living off my father's money. It's time for you to learn how to live on your own." The backyard went silent. Even the children stopped running. My mother slowly lowered her fork onto her paper plate. My father, an 87-year-old man whose hands had spent more than 60 years working with wood, concrete, and machinery, simply tightened his grip around his plastic cup. And my son kept talking. He talked about independence. He talked about responsibility. He talked about how old people shouldn't expect their children to keep paying their bills. He talked as if my parents were strangers who had somehow attached themselves to our family. What he didn't know was that 12 years earlier, my father had sold 27 acres of land he loved to save that same son from bankruptcy. What he didn't know was that my mother had spent years caring for his children while he and his wife worked. And what he definitely didn't know was that I had quietly spent more than $400,000 over the years making sure both generations of my family were protected. But that wasn't the part that hurt me most. The worst part came when I looked at my son and asked him one simple question. If I'm 87 someday and I need your help, will you tell me the same thing? He looked away. Then he shrugged. I guess that depends. Those 4 words stayed with me because I thought I had just heard the cruelest thing my son could ever say. I was wrong. 8 months later, that same son stood on my front porch in the middle of a freezing rainstorm. His house was close to foreclosure. His bank account was almost empty. His wife was crying in their car. And my son, the man who had once told my elderly parents they should stop taking my money, was standing in front of me, asking for exactly what he had mocked: help. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 62 years old, and before that day, I believed being a good father meant making sure my children never had to experience the kind of financial fear I had known when I was young. I didn't realize that sometimes the easiest way to destroy a person's sense of responsibility is to make every consequence disappear. I learned that lesson the hard way. But to understand what happened between my son and me, you have to understand where we came from. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. My parents, Robert and Margaret Mercer, never had much money, but they had something I didn't appreciate until I was older. They had stability. My father worked construction for most of his life. My mother managed a school cafeteria. They lived in the same white-sided house for nearly 50 years. It wasn't impressive. The roof had been replaced twice. The porch leaned slightly to the left. The garage door had 3 different shades of white, because my father always used whatever leftover paint he had. But when I think of home, that's the house I see. I see my mother's kitchen. I smell coffee. I hear my father's old radio playing baseball, and I remember the sound of his boots coming through the back door after work. When I was 9, I broke my leg falling out of a tree. My father carried me almost half a mile to the truck, because there was no cell service where we lived. When I was 16, I wrecked my first car. Dad didn't yell. He looked at the damage, sighed, and said, "Well, son, now you know what happens when you take a corner faster than the road allows." Then he spent 2 weekends repairing it. When I married Carol at 25, my parents gave us $1,500 for our apartment deposit. It wasn't much by today's standards. To us, it was everything. When our son Ryan was born, my mother watched him while Carol returned to work. Ryan adored her. He called her Grandma Maggie. He followed my father around the yard with a plastic hammer. My father built him a little wooden workbench. Ryan spent hours pretending to repair things. Back then, I never imagined that one day the same boy would sit across from those 2 people and tell them they were living off me. But children grow, and sometimes they grow into people you don't recognize. Ryan was 38 when the story really began. He worked as a regional sales manager for a construction supply company. His wife, Megan, worked part-time as a nurse. They had 2 children. Lily was 9, Noah was 6. They weren't poor. They weren't wealthy either. They lived comfortably. They had 2 cars, a nice home, vacations every year, private activities for the children, a membership at a local fitness club. Ryan also liked expensive hobbies. He had bought a motorcycle, then a bass boat, then a newer truck. Every purchase came with a reason. The boat was for family weekends. The truck was for work. The motorcycle was something he had always wanted. I never said much. I had money. My wife and I had saved carefully. I had worked for 37 years as a maintenance supervisor at a regional hospital. I wasn't rich, but I had done something my parents hadn't been able to do. I had saved. I had a retirement account. I had investments. I owned my home. And because I remembered how difficult our early years had been, I sometimes helped Ryan. I paid for school activities. I covered unexpected medical bills. I paid his family phone plan. Once, When his truck needed a transmission, I quietly paid half. I didn't think of it as spoiling him. I thought of it as being a father. Then, 11 years before the barbecue, I began helping my parents every month. It started with $600. Then their property taxes increased. Then my father's prescriptions became more expensive. Then the furnace failed. Eventually, I was sending them $1,200 every month. My mother always complained, "Daniel, we don't need this much." I'd say, "Then save it." She'd laugh, "Your father will spend it on some ridiculous tool." Dad would yell from the other room. I heard that. It became a joke. But the money mattered, not because they were irresponsible, because they were old. And because I knew how quickly an ordinary expense could become a crisis. Carol supported me completely. One night, after I had transferred the monthly payment, she looked at me and said, "You know what your parents gave you." "I know." "Then don't feel guilty for giving something back." I didn't, not once, until that afternoon in June. The house Ryan wanted was beautiful. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, finished basement, large yard, a neighborhood with excellent schools. It cost nearly $600,000. Ryan and Megan had saved $35,000. They needed another $75,000 for the down payment and closing expenses. At first I thought he was joking. Then he said, "Dad, we were hoping you'd help." I shook my head. "I can't give you $75,000. He frowned. "Why?" "Because I have retirement expenses." "You've got savings." "Yes." "And investments." "Yes." "So why not?" "Because that money is for the future." Ryan leaned back. "You always say family comes first." "It does." "Then why are you giving Grandma and Grandpa money every month?" That question changed the entire afternoon. I looked at him. "They're my parents. They have Social Security. They're 84 and 87. They have a house. They have expenses." He shook his head. "They don't need $1,200 every month." My mother was sitting close enough to hear every word. I could see her face tightening. I said, "Ryan, let's not do this here." But he continued, "No, Dad. Someone needs to tell you." "Tell me what?" "You're wasting money." My father looked up. Ryan turned toward him. "I'm sorry, Grandpa, but it's true." Dad didn't respond. Ryan continued, "You've had your whole life. You've got your house. You've got Social Security." My mother whispered, "We're not asking him for anything." Ryan shrugged. "That's not the point." "What is the point?" I asked. "The point is that Dad keeps choosing you over his own family." I felt my jaw tighten. "My own family?" "Your grandchildren." I looked at Lily and Noah playing in the yard. Then I looked at Ryan. "Do you think my parents aren't my family?" He sighed. "You know what I mean." "No." He became frustrated. "Dad, you can't keep acting like everyone needs you." I answered quietly. "I'm not acting." "Then stop." "Stop what?" "Paying for them." My mother lowered her eyes. I asked Ryan, "Why?" "Because they need to learn independence." I stared at him. Then I asked the question that would stay with all of us. "If I'm 87 someday, and I need your help, will you tell me the same thing?" He looked uncomfortable. "I guess that depends." That was the moment I stopped seeing him as the boy I raised. I still loved him, but I saw the man he had become, and I knew something had to change. That night, I didn't yell. I didn't call Ryan. I didn't even tell Carol what I was thinking. I went downstairs, opened my financial notebook, and began writing. Ryan's phone plan, canceled. Truck insurance, transferred. Emergency credit card, closed. Monthly family allowance, ended. Children's extracurricular expenses, stopped. I didn't touch anything that affected the children's basic needs. I wasn't going to punish Lily and Noah, but I was going to stop protecting Ryan and Megan from every financial consequence. At midnight, I stared at the final list. Then I wrote one sentence. "Love does not require me to remove every consequence." On July 1st, I made the changes. Ryan called 20 minutes later. "Dad, what did you do?" "I did what you asked." "What?" "Independence. You canceled my insurance." "Yes." "You canceled the phone plan." "Yes." "You stopped paying for Lily's program." "I paid through the end of the month. After that, it's yours." His voice became angry. "You're punishing me." "No." "Then what is this?" "You told me people need to stand on their own feet." "I was talking about Grandpa. And I'm applying the same principle to you." Silence. Then he laughed. "You'll change your mind." "No." "You always do." "Not this time." He hung up. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt sick. That was the beginning of the hardest period of my life. Because boundaries sound simple when you talk about them. They're not simple when you're watching your child struggle. The first problem came 3 weeks later. Ryan's air conditioner failed. The compressor had to be replaced. He called me. Dad, I need a loan. Have you checked financing? Yes. Then use it. I don't want another loan. I understand. So help me. No. He was silent. Then he said, "You really mean this?" Yes. He hung up. 3 days later, Megan's car needed a transmission. Then Lily needed dental work. Then Ryan's company cut overtime. Their budget collapsed. And every time they faced a problem, they looked toward me. I kept saying no. It was brutal. One evening, Megan called Carol. "He's doing this to us." Carol listened. Then she said, "Daniel isn't doing this to you. He knows we can't manage." "You can." "No, we can't." Carol said, "Then you need to change how you spend." Megan started crying. "Are you choosing his parents over your own grandchildren?" Carol closed her eyes. "No." "Then why won't you help?" "Because helping doesn't mean paying every bill." The call ended. Carol sat on the bed. She looked exhausted. "I hate this." "So do I." "What if we're wrong?" I looked at her. "I don't know." That was the honest answer. For weeks I questioned myself. Then one Saturday, I drove to my parents' house. My father was sitting in the garage. I looked at him. He leaned back. "Remember 2011? I nodded. "Ryan's business?" "Yes." Dad was quiet. Then he said, "He almost lost everything." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "He owed more than he could pay. I thought the bank refinanced him." Dad shook his head. "It didn't." I stared at him. "What happened?" "Ryan came to us." "When?" "Late one night." Dad looked toward the field. He was terrified. "Why didn't he tell me?" "Because he was ashamed." "What did he ask?" "Nothing." Dad smiled sadly. He just sat in our kitchen and cried. I had never heard that before. "What did you do?" Dad looked at me. "We sold the orchard." I couldn't speak. "The 27 acres?" He nodded. "All of it." "Why?" "To pay his debt." I felt something twist inside me. "You never told me." "No." "Why?" "Because Ryan didn't want you to know." "You should have told me." Dad shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because we weren't doing it for credit." I stared at him. "How much did you get?" 61,000. "And you used all of it?" "Every dollar." I sat down. The orchard wasn't just land. It was where my grandfather had planted the first trees, where my father had taught me to drive a tractor, where Ryan had played as a child. Dad had always said he'd never sell it. Yet he had. For Ryan. And Ryan had never known. Does he know now? No. I looked at my father. "Why are you telling me?" "Because you're struggling with what to do." He pointed toward the house. "Sometimes you help someone once." Then he pointed toward me. "Sometimes you help them forever." He paused. "Only one of those is love." I understood. I had spent years confusing rescue with love. So had my father. We both thought protecting our children meant absorbing every consequence. But consequences are sometimes how people learn. September arrived. Ryan's expensive boat disappeared. Then his motorcycle. Then his newer truck. He bought an older pickup. He took weekend shifts. Megan worked more hours. They stopped taking vacations. They started cooking at home. I noticed. I didn't comment. One Sunday, I saw Ryan at a grocery store. He was comparing 2 brands of cereal. He saw me. We nodded. Neither of us spoke. That small moment affected me more than I expected. He wasn't asking me to pay. He was figuring it out. Then October came. My father fell. It happened early one morning. He slipped on the porch while carrying a box. He broke his shoulder. My mother called me. I drove to the hospital. Dad was sitting in bed with his arm in a sling. He smiled. "You look terrible." "You scared me." "I've been scaring you for 87 years. I laughed, but when the nurse left, Dad became serious. "Daniel." "Yes?" "If something happens to me, don't listen." I did. He reached for my hand. "Don't spend the rest of your life angry at Ryan." I looked away. "I'm trying. He'll learn." "What if he doesn't?" Dad smiled. "Then you keep loving him from a distance." I looked at him. "That's hard." "Parenthood usually is." He squeezed my hand. "Don't confuse forgiveness with giving him everything he asks for." Those words became important later. Dad recovered, slowly, but he never fully returned to his old strength. By Thanksgiving, Ryan had started visiting more often. At first it was just to see Grandma and Grandpa, then he began helping. He repaired a fence, cleaned the gutters, fixed a broken cabinet, replaced a light fixture. My father watched him. One day Dad said, "You're getting useful." Ryan laughed. "High praise." "It is." I stood nearby. For the first time in months, Father and son looked comfortable together. Then came my mother's 85th birthday. We invited about 30 people, family, friends, neighbors, nothing fancy, just food in the backyard. Ryan arrived carrying a homemade cake. My mother hugged him. "You made this?" "Well," Megan smiled. "He tried." Everyone laughed. The day went well, until Dad stood. He had something to say. "Before everyone leaves, I want to tell you something." I immediately knew. "Dad," he shook his head. "No." Then he looked at Ryan. "You deserve to know." Ryan frowned. "Know what?" Dad pointed toward the empty stretch of land beyond the house. "Do you remember the orchard?" Ryan looked confused. "What orchard?" Dad stared at him. "The orchard we used to have." Ryan looked at me, then back at Dad. "I don't understand." Dad took a folder from the table. He handed it to Ryan. Ryan opened it. The first page was a property sale document. His face changed. "What's this?" "The sale of the orchard." "Why?" Dad answered quietly. "To save you." Ryan stopped breathing for a second. "What? In 2011, you were going to lose your house?" Ryan's hands began shaking. "No. Yes. I thought the bank didn't save you." Dad paused. "We did." Ryan looked at me. "Did you know?" I shook my head. "No." Ryan looked back at Dad. "You sold the orchard?" "Yes." "For me?" "Yes." Tears filled Ryan's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dad smiled. "Because I didn't want your gratitude." Ryan sat down. "I didn't know." "I know. I thought I fixed it." "You didn't." Ryan covered his face. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Dad said, "Your father has been doing the same thing for us." Ryan looked at me. "What?" My mother handed him another folder. Inside were years of financial records, transfers, bills, medical expenses, home repairs, insurance. Ryan looked through them. "How much?" I shook my head. "Don't." "How much?" My mother answered. "Over 400,000. Ryan stared at me. "You gave them that much?" I nodded. "Why?" I looked toward my father. "Because they gave me everything first." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "I told them they were taking your money." My father looked at him. "They never took anything." Ryan began crying. "I was wrong." Dad nodded. "Yes." Ryan looked at me. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't forgive him, because I wanted him to understand that forgiveness wasn't something I could hand him like a check. It had to mean something. Finally, I said, "I believe you." He looked surprised. But believing you doesn't mean forgetting." He nodded. "I understand." Then he did something unexpected. He stood up, walked to my mother, and hugged her. "I'm sorry, Grandma." She wrapped her arms around him. "You were foolish." He laughed through tears. "Yes, but you're still my grandson." Then he hugged my father. Dad whispered, "Don't waste what you learned." Ryan nodded. "I won't." The party continued. There was no applause, no celebration, because nobody had won. A family had simply survived a painful lesson. After everyone left, Ryan stayed. He sat beside me on the porch. "I thought you were choosing them." "I wasn't." "I know." "I was trying to teach you." "I know." He looked at the yard. "I hated you for it." "I know." "I thought you didn't love us." I looked at him. "I never stopped." He nodded. "But you stopped rescuing me." "Yes." He took a deep breath. "That hurt." "It was supposed to." He looked at me. I added, "Not because I wanted you to suffer." He nodded. "But because I wanted you to become capable." He stared at his hands. "I think I'm finally getting it." The next winter was hard. Ryan's business had its own problems. Megan's hours were cut. They still struggled. But this time, they didn't call me asking for money. They called asking for advice. Should we refinance? How much should we keep in emergency savings? Should we sell the house? Those were conversations I could have. And I did. I helped them make decisions. I didn't make
decisions for them. That was the difference. 8 months after the barbecue, the phone rang at 11:47 p.m. It was Ryan. "Dad, what's wrong?" "We're in trouble." My heart tightened. "What happened?" "The bank sent us a foreclosure notice." I sat up. "How much do you owe?" He told me. It was a serious amount, but not impossible. I asked, "How much do you have?" "Almost nothing." "Where are you?" "At home." "Stay there." I put on my coat. Carol came downstairs. "What's happening?" "Ryan's in trouble." She looked at me. "Are you going to give him the money?" I stopped. Then I said, "No." She nodded. "Good." We drove to Ryan's house. The porch light was on. Megan was crying. The children were asleep upstairs. Ryan looked exhausted. He had a folder full of papers. He handed them to me. "I don't know what to do." I sat down. "Okay." He looked surprised. "You're not angry?" "I'm your father." "After everything I said?" "Yes." I opened the folder. "We're gonna figure out what happened." I spent 2 hours reviewing their finances. They had made several mistakes, but the situation wasn't hopeless. They had too much house, too much debt, too many monthly obligations. The answer wasn't another check. The answer was downsizing, selling the house, paying the debt, moving into something affordable. Ryan stared at me. You're saying we should sell? Yes. We'll lose everything. No. You'll lose the house you wanted. He looked down, then nodded. I guess I will, but you'll keep your family. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw no anger, only understanding. They sold the house. Not immediately. It took months. They found a smaller home. 3 bedrooms. No finished basement. No giant yard. No luxury kitchen. But the payments were manageable. The foreclosure threat disappeared. Ryan found another position. Megan increased her hours. They rebuilt slowly. One day, Ryan came to my house. He stood on the porch. I remembered another night, 8 months earlier. A freezing rain. A frightened man. A request for money. But this time, he wasn't asking. He held out a small envelope. What is this? He smiled. My first payment. I opened it. Inside was a check. Not much, but enough. I looked at him. You don't owe me. I know. Then why? Because I want to contribute. I handed it back. No. He frowned. Why? Keep it. Dad, save it. He smiled. Okay. Then he hugged me. And this time, neither of us pulled away quickly. My father lived another year, long enough to see Ryan change. Long enough to watch his great-grandchildren visit every Saturday. Long enough to see the family become quieter, better, more honest. One evening, Dad and I sat on the porch. The sunset was orange over the fields. He's doing okay, Dad said. Yes. You proud? I smiled. Very. Dad nodded. Then you did your job. I looked at him. What job? Being his father. My father died that winter, peacefully. At home. My mother held his hand. I held the other. Ryan was there. So was Megan. The children were sleeping upstairs. Dad opened his eyes one last time. He looked at me, then Ryan, then Mom. His voice was barely audible. Take care of each other. Those were his last words. After he died, I thought about all the things he had sacrificed. The orchard, the money, the years. But the greatest thing he gave us wasn't any of that. It was the lesson. He taught me that love isn't the same as rescue. He taught Ryan that independence isn't the absence of family. It's becoming strong enough to support the family when someone else needs you. At the funeral, Ryan stood beside me. He looked at my father's coffin. Then he whispered, I wish I could tell him one more thing. What? Thank you.
I put my hand on his shoulder. He knew. Ryan nodded. I hope so. He did. After the funeral, our family changed again. My mother moved closer to us. Ryan became the person who visited her most often. He fixed things. He brought groceries. He drove her to appointments. He checked her smoke detectors. He changed light bulbs. He never asked how much anything cost. One Saturday, I arrived at Mom's house. Ryan was already there. He was standing on a ladder. What are you doing? Cleaning the gutters. That's my job, he laughed. Grandpa said I needed to become useful. I smiled. He's still bossing you around. Apparently. We both laughed. That was the moment I realized the story had finally reached its real ending. Not the apology. Not the money. Not the house. The transformation. The boy who once believed family existed to support him had become the man who supported his family. And maybe that's the greatest thing a parent can witness. Not a child becoming rich. Not a child buying a beautiful house. Not a child giving you money, but a child becoming dependable. Years have passed since that barbecue. I still remember the exact sentence Ryan said. Stop living off my father's money. For a long time those words made me angry. Now they remind me of how much he had to learn. And how much I had to learn too, because I made mistakes. I had spent years paying bills without asking whether my help was actually helping. I had protected Ryan from consequences. I had taught him, unintentionally, that if things became difficult, Dad would appear. I wasn't solely responsible for the man he became, but I was responsible for the lessons I continued teaching. So when I finally said no, I wasn't abandoning my son. I was giving him something more valuable than money. Responsibility. Today, Ryan doesn't have the biggest house in the neighborhood. He doesn't have a boat. He doesn't drive a luxury truck. He doesn't take expensive vacations. But he has something he didn't have before. Peace. He has savings. He has a manageable mortgage. He has a family that trusts him. And when his children need something, he doesn't immediately call me. He sits down and figures it out. That makes me prouder than any expensive purchase ever could. My mother is still with us. She's 88 now. She still complains that I arrived too early. She still makes too much food, and she still tells Ryan he's too skinny. Ryan visits her every Saturday. Sometimes he brings the children. Sometimes he comes alone. Sometimes they don't do anything. They sit. They talk. They remember. One afternoon, Mom asked Ryan, "Do you remember what you said to me that day?" Ryan looked embarrassed. "Yes." "What did you say?" He sighed. "I told you to stop taking Dad's money." She smiled. "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I understand." "Understand what?" Ryan took her hand. "That you weren't taking anything." Mom waited. "You were letting your son love you." She smiled. "That's better." He kissed her forehead. I stood in the doorway and watched them. I thought about my father. About the orchard. About the old farmhouse. About the backyard where everything had started. And I finally understood something. Families don't fall apart because of money. Money only exposes what people already believe. Ryan believed love meant receiving. My father believed love meant sacrificing. I believed love meant protecting. And over the years, we all had to learn something new. Love also means boundaries. Love means consequences. Love means telling someone no when yes would be easier. Love means letting your children struggle enough to become capable. And love means knowing when to help without taking away their strength. I still help my mother. I still buy groceries sometimes. I still pay for things she cannot comfortably afford. But now I don't feel guilty. I don't feel obligated. I don't feel afraid. I do it because I choose to. And Ryan understands that. Sometimes he contributes. Sometimes I do. Sometimes we simply sit together and talk. No score, no accounting, no expectations. Just family. The old house is gone now. The porch where my father sat has been demolished. The orchard is no longer ours. But we planted an apple tree at Mom's new home. Ryan dug the hole. I held the tree. My grandchildren filled the soil. Mom watched from her chair. When the first blossoms appeared, she called me. "Daniel." "Yes?" "The tree is blooming." I smiled. "I know. It reminds me of your father." "Me too." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father would be proud." I looked outside. The tree was covered in white flowers, and for the first time, I didn't think about what we had lost. I thought about what had grown. My father gave up an orchard to save his grandson. I spent years giving money to protect my parents. My son spent years believing those sacrifices were weaknesses. Then life taught him what none of us could teach him, that being supported isn't the same as being loved. And being independent doesn't mean you stop needing people. It means you become someone others can depend on. That's the lesson I hope my grandchildren remember. Not the amount of money anyone gave. Not the house we lost. Not the orchard that disappeared. The lesson: if you have elderly parents, don't make them feel guilty for needing help. If you have adult children, don't be afraid to set boundaries. And if you're somewhere in the middle, remember that love doesn't require you to destroy yourself financially. You can help without rescuing. You can forgive without forgetting. You can say no without becoming cruel. And you can love someone enough to let them grow. My son once looked at my 84-year-old mother and told her to stop taking my money. 8 months later, he stood on my porch asking me to save his family. I didn't give him a check. I gave him something better. I sat down beside him. I opened his bills, and I taught him how to save himself. Years later, he became the person who showed up for my mother without being asked. That was the real repayment. Not money. Not gratitude. Not inheritance. Character. My father used to say, anybody can give someone something when they have plenty. Then he'd point toward himself and add, the real test is what you do when giving hurts. I understand that now, but I also understand something he learned late in life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can give someone is not another dollar. It's the chance to stand on their own feet. And sometimes the hardest word a parent can say is also the word that saves a child. No, I won't pay that bill. No, I won't buy that house. No, I won't erase that consequence. But yes, I'll sit beside you. Yes, I'll teach you. Yes, I'll help you find a way. Yes, I'll still love you. That is what I finally learned. And that is what my son finally learned too. The day Ryan told my parents to stop taking my money, I thought our family had broken. I was wrong. That was the day our family finally began learning how to love each other without a price attached. And when I look back now, I wouldn't change the ending. because the greatest inheritance I could ever leave my son isn't money. It's the ability to stand when I am no longer there to catch him. And if he can teach that same lesson to his children, then perhaps all those painful years were worth it. Perhaps the orchard wasn't really lost. Perhaps it simply grew somewhere else. In him. In his children. In the way our family finally learned that real wealth isn't what you can afford to buy. It's who will show up when the lights go out. Who will sit beside you when you're afraid? Who will tell you the truth when you don't want to hear it? Who will help you stand? And, when necessary, who will love you enough to let you fall? Because sometimes falling is how you finally learn to stand.